It is Netanyahu who said this and not the Israeli government as a government. In fact, we now know that last night when Netanyahu convened his cabinet in order to agree on this Trump-imposed ceasefire or Trump-proposed ceasefire, no vote was held. And in fact, he gathered all his ministers, it appears, mostly to gag them so that they wouldn't say anything to the media. This is a prime minister who is acting more and more unilaterally, surrounded just by a very close coterie of aides, unelected aides. And the statement, in a way, reflects the sentiment of an agreement made between two strong men, Netanyahu and Trump, and it is as strong or as fragile as I think they will decide it to be. Of course, the Iranian strongman, Khamenei, will have what to say about this as well. But I think we are talking about no documents signed, no official ceasefire signed, just as both in the case of Israel and in the case of the United States, no formal declaration of war was ever made on either side. We know that there are, in the US Congress, many complaints about Trump's actions without consulting Congress. So Israel finds itself in a similar way. And I think that this reflects domestically for Israelis a little bit of what is coming up. In other words, the Israeli government took excellent advantage of the last 10 days to pass all kinds of regulations or impose all kinds of norms. For example, the arrest of anyone wearing an anti-war T-shirt. For example, passing pseudo-legislation granting defense agencies extraordinary powers over communications companies, saying that this was necessary in the case of a cyber attack. The government has taken advantage of this. And yesterday, to make things very plain, the justice minister said that this war was not yet over and that it would be won through determination. He wasn't speaking of Iran, and he was not speaking of Gaza, that the entire Israeli government is trying to pretend no longer exists. He was speaking of his war against the Israeli Supreme Court and the judicial authorities of the state. And so that is what Israelis, I think, are going to be facing now that the principal part of the Iran conflict appears to be over.
Finally, Noga, just while you're talking there, I'm seeing a quote coming into us from the Israeli opposition leader, Yair Lapid, saying or calling now for an end to the more than 20-month war with Hamas in Gaza. Of course, that war still very much ongoing. Does this make any difference to that?
I'm not sure it does. Neither Netanyahu nor Trump even mentioned Gaza or Palestinians in their statements, in any of their recent statements. Netanyahu has no way out of the war in Gaza. As I was saying before, he launched the war in Iran without any way out except for bringing Donald Trump in, and he got that exception. So that will be a win for him. But in Gaza, he does not have a way out without risking losing power, which he's unwilling to do. And so I'm afraid that the Gaza situation is going to grind on. And I say this even with an eye towards Netanyahu, who has been euphoric in the last week after really a grinding 20 months for him, loathed by much of his public, mistrusted by a vast majority of his public, who still hold him responsible for the failures of October 7th. I don't know how long this sheen will last, given that very quickly Israelis are going to be thrown back into the cauldron of what appears to be a never-ending war in Gaza. During the time of this Iran conflict, Israel buried several soldiers. That war is very much ongoing. Israel continues to be more and more isolated internationally because of its actions in Gaza and the humanitarian disaster that continues in Gaza. And Israeli hostages continue to rot under the soil in Gaza. So I think Netanyahu may have a harder landing than he had hoped.